Okay, here we go again, and as you can see I have a new setup. I've got a desk again, and I'm going to be doing one art showcase, mainly on something that I've already kind of shown in the past, which is a map that I did, and I'm basically going to just show what I've been doing ever since I got back at my desk. And we're going to kick it off right away. This is what the original one was. Now this is a direct scan, so it has, some imperfections down the side because I didn't colour all the way to the edges, and a few pencil marks here and there. But overall, this was the finished first draft, I called it, and after scanning it in, I cleaned it up and improved a few areas. Added some smaller little islands which aren't that easy to see when I open up the coloured one. But overall, yeah, this was the original, done in alcohol-based marker pens. It took can't exactly say how long it took because I did it on and off over a period of a few weeks, but it didn't take too long, I don't think, because it was an on and off project. Anyway, on to the next picture. So this is the enhanced version, which is what I used Photoshop for. It's exactly the same, it's just been tweaked and heightened in areas. The river systems are a little bit more defined, so if I go back to the main map, you can see the river systems here. They're not clear at all, whereas on this one they're more defined, so you can actually see them better. The lines are more crisp, and you'll probably see a couple of the smaller islands now that weren't that easy to see before. And if I zoom in to actual pixels, we'll get very close, and move over here, I think it is. Yeah, I left some little areas here. They're very, very small. Just little details really that add to, extremely small islands, because this map is meant to be really big. So yeah, a couple of the image had imperfections, but when I added like black outlines to it, it actually made some very small little islands, and it looked a lot better. So I thought, okay, I'll leave them here. It just adds a bit more detail. So yeah, this is the full coloured version. It looks slightly different in colours to this, because here it's very green, whereas on here it's kind of this dull greenish yellow kind of colour. That's because originally I wanted this to be like a savanna, but I couldn't quite make it one with the marker pens I had, because it would be too close to the desert. So yeah, that area is changed, this little area and this little area. I think there's a little patch here as well, and here. So yeah, this is the full coloured version, and I decided to get rid of all the detail of the water. So in the original here, we had like definition of water around areas where it'd be like shallower and deeper. I did it the wrong way around, so where it's shallow is actually dark, and where it's deep is really light. I meant to do it the other way around, but I was stupid and forgot. I got rid of all that so that it would be a nice, crisp, clear, defining image for the actual map. And then I decided to add the region names. I'll get onto that in a moment. So that was the first thing that I did, and then I decided to, and I'm just going to show it quickly, make a rustic kind of old-fashioned style version of the map. So it's in this kind of golden colours, a bit like what you see on Tolkien's maps, and I did the borders and stuff, but we'll get onto that in a minute. So yeah, and then I started layering this over the top of this image to start defining things. So we'll start first with I think we'll start first with the political map, because it's got the least different colours on it. So eventually, when I come to this book, there will be 3 primary factions and a neutral faction, and the main faction is obviously the Zunimaru that have been rehomed, that have accepted the Galactic Federation as their overseers. So while they do have their own laws, their own systems and everything, they are still kind of being led by the Galactic Federation and have to imply their laws to their own. So yeah, they're kind of the first big faction. Then we have the Fellas Union, which is this red one. They own these little islands around here. They used to be members of the Federation, but didn't actually like being led by the Galactic Unions, and said, we want to rule our own country, you know, our own planet, our own laws, all that. So we're gonna move out of the territory and claim our own. And the whole areas here were originally under the banner of the wild tribal people, and also the neutral folk as well. So these areas marked in red on this side of the map would have been green or this kind of tealish colour. These areas here, they would have been golden. These were the first territories the Fellas Union claimed, mainly through political means. They didn't take it by brute force. They just kicked out the old political members who still believed in the Federation, and replaced them with their own. And then from there, they went and reclaimed all this territory that was wild. And this area here, which I believe was, this area was part of the neutral territory, because these guys, they don't really care. They don't really want to side with either. They just want to get on with life. Think of them as like the tribal people doing their own thing, happy to help, but also not willing to adopt policies. So yeah, so they're the three biggest factions. Even though this area is mainly green, this is still a proper faction. It's its own system, whereas these are lots of individual wild tribes. So yeah, that's the political map. And then I thought, okay, now how are they all going to, connect to each other? That's where the transport map comes in. So it's a basic colour one, but with a lot of little lines and stuff. There are more cities and towns in this. These are just the ones that have direct connections. So in terms of the cities and the little towns that are connected, they are marked by yellow dots. The bigger the dot, the bigger the territory hub is. So these are the capitals of each major region, whereas these are smaller little towns, maybe cities, but they're not as big. And the two types of transportation that the natives use, at least, the Fellas and the Zunimaru, are mainly a bullet train system, which they call the Wuba, which just means fast thing. So they mainly use that to get around the land, and then they have your ships, which are marked in green, and ferries and things like that. So they do have road networks, but they often are very small and locally isolated. So, for example, this area here, they would probably only have one main road that runs between these two towns and this town here, and not really have one that runs all the way down here. This area is probably the only way you can get to it is either by boat or by the Wuba, maybe a spaceship. Spaceships are available. It's just that they're really restricted to who can operate them. So members of the Federation of Zunimaru can't actually fly them. They have to be escorted by somebody who's part of the Galactic Unions. So yeah, they can fly about, but the thing is, if you use a spaceship to fly outside of the Federation's territory and go into the Fellas Union's territory, they will not tolerate that. They'll try and bring the ship down. So yeah, these are two primary forms of transportation. Are your boats, which they can go further down here, but it's not exactly safe. And then the Wu bar, which is the bullet train, and there are smaller train networks, but these are the biggest and the most heavily used. So speaking of danger, I'm a bit of a geology and paleontological nerd, so I had to do a tectonic map version. Um, so yeah, this is also where all the volcanoes and stuff are marked out. It can look a little bit confusing to start with, so I'll explain it as best I can in as simple of terms. The red lines, your tectonic plates, they are found underneath the planet's surface. So, it's what helps move the continents and things. So it's like in our own tectonic plates, how Africa separated from South America at some point. They used to actually be connected. I mean, all the landmass used to be known as Pangaea, which was a big supercontinent. The same has applied here, only in reverse. Now, the history of Idris is very turbulent, to put it lightly. And the continent before the Junimaro were rehomed here was extremely different. So a lot of these continents, this continent was down here and was part of a super cold continent, and this one here was attached to this landmass. It had just like a big river running through it. But over time and the new terraforming processes, a lot of explosives like not exactly nuclear bombs. They were much larger. They had to be used to restabilize the temperature of the planet for a while. Caused the tectonic plates to move a bit more rapidly. So this continent eventually broke away, and this continent moved up this way. So, and a lot of areas clashed together. So it's a bit of a mess. But because of these continents now merging into their own version of a supercontinent, it's created a lot of mountain ranges, which are natural barriers and natural borders, as you'll see in a moment when I bring the border map back up. But you can see here all these dots. Now, the grey dots, volcanoes that aren't active anymore, they're dead, they're not connected really to a magma deposit anymore. The greenish ones active, but they're not ones that are constantly erupting. They're ones that could go off at any time, but not constantly going off. And the yellow ones here are extremely active. They erupt on a regular basis or indefinitely. And obviously the arrows show the direction that these tectonic plates move in. So when they collide, you get more mountain ranges and more volcanoes. So everything pretty much on these red lines has a mountain range or is slightly higher in elevation, and is littered with these volcanoes. So yeah, tectonic plates. Now back onto the borders, you'll see how these tectonic plates creating the mountain ranges and volcanic ranges line up with the natural borders I mentioned. So most of the borders for the territories actually follow these natural borders. So you have these mountain ranges running all the way around here. It splits here a little bit, and you have the mountain range run down here and over here, and there's a little one here as well. So most of the borders are actually made alongside these mountain ranges, but some of them aren't. This one here in particular is separated by this river. Now the towns and stuff we'll get onto again in a moment. I'm going to quickly switch to a different map because this area requires a little bit more thinking. So we'll get back to that in just a moment. We'll start with the altitude map, which is in grey colours. It's very hard to see with the darker background, but it's one that I'm not planning to really release in the book. It's something to help me with my writing process, and it's a very, very rough guide for it. So everything that's lower is in this kind of really deep dark colour, and it's hotter as well, and then everything that's in these kind of middle tones is warm but not scorching hot, and then you have these lighter ones which are cold but not freezing. And then you have these in pure white where they are freezing. Now you'll see here that this is area, it's really dark. This is where the savannas run, and it's really close to the cold ones, but this is because of the elevation changes. This is the lowest plane, so it's level with this area, and then it goes up into like taiga biome or taiga biome, and then into the extreme cold, high altitude areas where it's sheet ice and glaciers, things like that. Not really mountains, it's just this sheer shell of ice, more like what you'd see in the Ice Age. So yeah, it just helps define height for me so that I can work out my artwork better. So this map probably won't actually make it into the book. Now this one's really colourful and really messy and is going to get some revisions in the future, but it is the basic climate and biome map really. We have obviously our caps here which are extremely cold. Everything in the kind of pale blue icy colour, this is all the taiga biome and tundra, so anywhere that's high, like this range here will be like your foresty area, and then up here are your high ice peaks, and then we have the tropical ones, which it's quite vague, but they are more like your Caribbean islands and some Mediterranean, kind of islands. So it's mainly just affected the smaller islands in these half of the two big ones. And then we have the savannah, as I mentioned here. And this area is actually just grassland. It's not savannah, it's just grassland, which are like your prairies and things where you'd see bison in North America. Then we have our forests and alpines. So everything here would probably be the alpine because it's colder, and here a combination of alpine and forest because you have a little bit of a mountain range here which would be alpine based, and everything here would be forest, and this area would be forest, alpine down there, and then forest around the lower section of it, and then the jungle is self-explanatory. Obviously the mountains will be very cold at the very top, and will have kind of an alpine-y feel, but as a whole this is jungle, and you have jungle running around the edges of places as well, because Idris as a whole is extremely warm and quite humid, so that's why most of the map, as you'll see, is dominated by warm areas rather than cold areas. And then we have swamps and marshes. Now the difference between the swamp and a marsh is that the swamps are up where it's warmer, where it's hotter, and they are more like your bayous and the likes of Florida, where it's very hot and humid. And then you have only one area really, which is here, which is where the marshland is, and that's more like akin to the likes of the Norfolk Broads, as I'd like to call it, but there are other areas, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. I mainly just think of Norfolk Broads because it's quite marshy around the Norfolk area. Then we have obviously our desert and badlands. So the deserts are usually like your Arizona, your Utah, and then your badlands like your Montana areas, which are quite high up. But these are obviously quite volcanic. So this area up here is not actually a full desert, it is a pure volcanic wasteland, but that's the only area that has it. But it does have some little jungle around the edges still, some areas where there is life, where it's close to the water, but as a whole it's quite volcanic there, not the most pleasant. So now we'll be going back to the borders. So here we go. This is where it gets very fun because there's a lot of random letters and words here, and that's because the map is actually written in the Maru dialect, the Maru tongue. Um, Even though as a whole the species uses what they call the common tongue, which is English, and they also do have areas which speak other forms of alien language and uh, like human languages as well. So I'll start with where most come to land when they're brought to Idris, which is Madal, which just means human country or human lands. So this is the area where all the new settlers come, and humans generally stay in Madal. They don't venture out of it, because if we go back to the biome map, if it loads up, it's quite warm, quite pleasant. It's only this little swamp area that's not very nice, but it's actually marsh, this one. So yeah, they generally stay here because it's quite pleasant. And if we look at the tectonic map, there's only one active volcano in Madal. The rest are all inactive, so it's very safe, and it's very pleasant weather. So it's, you know, it all comes into place, all these different maps. It helps establish what areas are very hard to live in, what areas are very pleasant to live in, and the types of societies that will be established in these areas. So yeah, all these labelled areas are countries rather than separate continents, because the continents, as I said, have either mashed together or split off, and they don't really name them by continents. So yeah, Madal is the human area, and where the settlers come. So they come to this. They call it Oltel, which is Fish Town. It's called a town, but it is it has grown, so it is a large city, because this is where everybody comes in and gets processed before going wherever else on Idris. But they've not renamed it, so it's still just called Fish Town. And as you can guess, this is a primary fishing area for non-salt fish, saltwater fish, and it's also a great trading hub between the other areas of the Federation, because it's on the transport route. It has to have a boat to get to this little town, but it is on the Wubar pathway, and it also has all these water connections that run all out here. It is a really good hub, and that's why they primarily started setting up the rehoming process here. So I go back to borders, and next we go to Heimdall, which is high country or highlands, and its capital is actually where the royals live, which is why it's got Matu at the end. So it's a high kingdom, because this is where the royals live, and they are based high up in the mountains. So this is the highest elevated area of Idris, and that's why they wanted the royals there, and it's got lush jungle all around it as well. But it does have an active volcano down here, so this is where the capital of the Federation is, and that's where the volcano is. So it's only a stone's throw away, and it probably would cause quite a few disruptions. And I also believe, so we'll bring the tectonics up, you have the Wubar line running here, and the active volcano is just around here. So you can imagine if that volcano becomes extremely active and goes from this green one to a yellow one, that it could cause severe disruption. Which is why they have a system in place where if the volcano becomes active, this Wubar line gets shut down, and they will start a new line from Ultel around there and go through Nadal and in that way. So it's longer, but it's safer because going this way through the marshes is not advised, especially with the higher level apex predators in that area that don't like these types of things passing through their territory. So yeah, so Haimartu is very high up. It is the most visited place because obviously it's got its royal family there. Um, in terms of trade, there isn't much there. They don't do much in the way of mining. It's more of a touristy place and a place that the rich, super rich live. So next on our table here is Nadal, which is the Firelands or Fire Country. Now, it's not because it's got volcanoes. If anything, this has none. So, yeah, the Fire Country is only named this way just because it is so intensely hot. It's very dry, and the Lantel, which is the dry town, is, as its namesake says, very dry, and it's more like a big place akin to Las Vegas, where people come to gamble and do some shady things, and it's also got port access as well as the Woo Bar access. So it's got port access to these islands here, and it's also got a ferry that can run down to the base of Haimartu, because here would be a waterfall, and it can offload tourists there, but it's obviously right next to a volcano. So yeah, Lantil is more for the adventurous type who likes to do a lot of drinking, gambling, things like that. It's not the most pleasant of places. It's quite seedy. So we'll stick to the Federation of Ujinimaru's territories first. So we'll go all the way back down here to Sodal. So that is the opposite of Nadal, which is the Firelands. This is the Coldlands, or also known as the Snow King, Snow Country. And it's so cold down here that they can't grow anything really, and they have to import a lot of resources, which is why when we look at the transportation map, it has these connections from several ports and obviously access on the Woo Bar. They heavily rely on the internal and external transport systems because it is just so fiercely cold. They have to import everything, and yeah, so Fortel is the river town, and it is probably the smallest of the capitals, but it's still too large to be called a town. You'll notice this with the towns, so you've got Dry Town, Fish Town, and River Town. They really are cities now, but they haven't been renamed because they're just stick to what they have. They don't like to change a lot of things because, as they're cats don't like change. So yeah, Rivertown is just a small city, and it mainly imports goods. It doesn't export anything. If anything, this place is just somewhere for those who like the cold to live, and also people who like to travel, because the only other thing that they can do, other than maybe fish out at sea, is travel to all these other continents. This continent here is not occupied really, it's left wild, even though it's part of the Federation territory. There might be a settlement there eventually, but because anything below Fortel is so cold, it's almost unbearable to live. So these areas will probably be left untouched. So back up to the Federation territory here, we have Katadal, which is dead lands or dead country, and as you can guess, this is the Badlands area. Obviously we have the volcanic region up here, which is very fierce, and we have Sekotal, which is different because this means strange city. So this is one of the first ones that the Jinimaru made that was actually dubbed a city right away, because most of these were small because of the flow that came in didn't occupy most of these areas in dense populations enough to call them a city, whereas this one was established when this area was already set up, and so this population was very large right away and grew very quickly, so it was automatically given the title of city, which is Tal rather than Tel. Now Sekotal is named Strange City because it's, as you could guess, very strange. A lot of the native Jinimaru who live here speak with a strange accent, and this is because of most of the ones that came in to Ultel didn't integrate with the same accent. They came from certain countries in planet Earth and just stuck with their accents and left and moved and established this place. Whereas everywhere else, they kind of all gelled in Ultel before making these areas, and they all established the same accent. So Sekotal is strange because it has a different accent to the rest of these areas, and it also is on the very edge of a highly volcanic area, and as you can guess, a lot of the rest of the nation thought it's really strange that you decide to build your city right next to a volcanic region when you could have built it closer to the coast where it's safer. So yeah, that's the Federation's territory. So now we're going to just talk about the neutral, which is Idris, which means hidden world or forgotten place. So this area is surrounded by the mountains and the water. It's got good natural defences, and it is the only place on the whole planet that still has the ruins of the past fella's civilization in it. They've been left untouched. The nature has tried to reclaim it, and then a new town started up here, and it was just previously just called Idris Town, but then they renamed it to Grektal, which is like Fossil City or Diggers City, because this is where a lot of archaeologists moved, and paleontologists as well, likely, but a lot of archaeologists moved from Ultel to Grektal to start researching the past fella's civilization, because a lot of the original history had become lost. So these guys are more about history and uncovering the past rather than mining any resources. The area is surrounded by these semi-active volcanoes, but they've actually played it smart and gone on the coastline, so they're not really affected by it. Then they do get earthquakes because they're on these areas where plates are really ramming into each other, and they do have a connection from the river, or the ocean I should say, and the Wuba. Now they're neutral mainly because these guys are scientists and they just want to uncover the past, as I said, and try and learn from the mistakes of the past civilization. And the other two factions are 100% political. They don't have anything else that interests them other than their political ideologies of I want to rule and dictate my own laws, and we should just be a part of the galactic community and obey the laws that they're setting up. Whereas these guys are like, forget you guys and your petty squabbling, we're going to just find out what went wrong and how we can better our civilization. So that ends the neutral grounds. You've got the wild area here, which is Domadal, which just means wild lands or wild country, and you just have random tribes all over the place. These are Jinimaru who were brought to Ultel, given the the whole I don't want to call it indoctrination, but they're basically given a bunch of lessons on civilization and what they're trying to establish here on Idris, and given quite an intelligence boost as well, because a lot of them that come in are very primitive and then given this treatment, and then next thing you know, oh, they're quite smart, populate the area. A lot of the ones that came in here that occupy Dormadal rejected everything. They said, no, we don't want any part of this. We want to live the life that we lived back on Earth, but they're not allowed to go back to Earth because they know too much. So they just stuck them here in this area and left it. And they're pretty much like the ones that you find on Earth, little remote tribes that bicker and squabble with one another and live their days in ignorance. They will attack anyone that comes in, unless they can see that you're not hostile. They don't trade with any of the nations. They just kind of tolerate them. They don't encroach on their land, as long as they don't encroach on theirs. But that's where we come on to the Fellas Union territories. Now we'll start over here, which is Tatel, which is the the quiet, the loud town. This is a big party place. You know, it's like Ibiza. Maru and all other alien races come here just to party. So there's not much to explain about that. If you ever heard of Ibiza, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, so yeah, Jital is the quiet city. It's one of the newest ones. It was made by groups who didn't like the loudness that this area had established and moved to make something quieter. And it's more like a hub for, really, if you think about it, Grektal. These guys like to do their research and things, but sometimes they don't have anywhere to study or practice their sciences. They just dig it out, take it somewhere to get cleaned, and then pop it into a museum, usually in Oltel. But to study things, they like to go to Jital, where it's quiet and has a lot of facilities that this area has, that the the Fellas Union stole, because whilst the Grektal folk will set up museums in Oltel and maybe even Heim Martu, the Fellas Union is more open to the neutral folk to use their assets, whereas the Federation legally can't let them use their assets, because of the regulations in place by the Galactic Union. So, as you can see there, that kind of puts the likes of the Grektal folk in favour of the Fellas Union, because they're more open to using their stuff. But at the same time, the Federation regime Maru have offered protection and are able to publish a lot of the resources that they need. It's just the technology that they can't use. So yeah, Jital is more like a science hub where they can research in quiet areas. It's very academic. I mean, the likes of Altal has its own academic areas, but it is a big city and it's mainly a processing hub, whereas Jital is your full-on academic city. So yeah, that's now down back into. Oh yeah, I didn't mention Ilden. It just means island nation. That's it. Next down here to Epiden, which is Epi is actually a type of fruit that's grown, but it's a spicy one. It's an awful lot like a chili pepper, so they just named this Spice Nation. So Epiden, and its capital is Namatu, This is the Fire Kingdom, and as you can tell, its kingdom is like Haimatu. Um, so this is the Fire Kingdom, and this city was originally established under the premise that they weren't surrounded by active volcanoes. Um, so it originally was called something different, but a lot of the locals forgot what it was originally called. But after they found out this area was riddled with volcanoes around it, they decided to rename it the Fire Kingdom because it's surrounded by fire. Um, the royal family here was a established royal family by those who were members of the Fellers Union. So the original folks who set up the Fellers Union aren't the royal family. The entire nation elected a royal family which has remained there. So they can't re-elect a royal family. It was just the first thing that they did. Whereas the Haimatu royal family was placed there by members of the Galactic Union. So this entire royal family was established through external alien interference, whereas this royal family was established through the native the native populace. So yeah, so the royal family here, they are actually more active and more involved with the people in their civilization. They process their equivalent of Congress, and it's like Parliament as well. So it's a massive group of elected individuals who run their government. Whereas here, it is completely dictated by the external interference of the Galactic Union. So none of the Federation members get to elect their government, whereas those in the Fellers Union do get to elect their government. So yeah, Namatu would be considered the hot seat for the Fellers Union, and Haimatu is the hot seat for the Federation. Now over here is Sidan, which is the small kingdom, or small nation I should say, and the city that occupies it is Fetal, which is the it can either mean bird city or sky city, and it's set up high up on the in the tree lines of this jungle, and is one of the few natural cities. So they build all the buildings alongside the trees rather than chopping the trees down. Build their roads in natural openings. They try their best not to destroy any of the trees. And as you can see, this is the only capital of this entire region. There are smaller towns, but this is the largest one, and is kind of the newest as well, because this island was vastly not populated. It was only occupied by a few tribal folk. The tribal folk still live on Puriden, but there's not as many. And puri is another fruit, but it's not an easy one to describe. It's more like a cinnamony fruit, so it's still got spice, but it's very sweet. So this is just called Fruit Nation, and this is where a lot of Idris's puri fruits come from. Even though they grow in the jungle, there is some jungle up here, but it is agriculturally farmed just outside of the jungles, and is exported. So the Fellers Union pretty much control not only the entire source of puri farming, but they also control a large chunk of the epi farming as well. Because whilst this entire band here is jungle, a lot of it is very wild and very high and difficult to farm. So these areas are very easy to farm because they're usually flatter. And Biden, which is old land or old nation, this was where the Fellows Union, because they branched out, people who left Lantel occupied these islands, and those who were at Altel took the river, occupied these islands, moved through island to island before reaching this area, and finding it cold. It's still livable cold, but it was colder than they wanted, so that's why they moved north to where it was warmer, and then obviously moved on to this area here. So yeah, Old Nation has the ruins and very minimally occupied towns and villages, and is very rustic and not very well established, and it's kind of been ignored. Whereas Siden and Epiden, and even these guys up here on Ilden, the more established ones. So yeah, that's the all the little areas. Now back to the coloured map. You can just see again, no borders, but you can faintly see where Siden is, and it has all this jungle around it. And Puriden on the marshes and swamps, I should say. A little bit of savanna down here, but not much. Big mountain range separating Biden from Puriden, Epiden, and Domadal, Idris, Katadal, Isliden, Nadal, Heimdal, Madal, and Sodal. So yeah, that's the map I've been working on, and I've been using them to try and establish more of a world that is easy for me to manage when I'm writing, so I can basically go back and say, oh, this scene takes place in Sodal territory, so it's going to be very cold, there's not going to be much volcanic activity or earthquakes, so I can rule those out of any story plots. And also has creatures as well in it that are unique to it. And speaking of which, I'm long overdue doing the talk on the last few pictures, which are the Taiga biome. So I'm going to do it very, very quickly because this video has gone on for quite a long time. We're going to start off with this apex predator. Again, I need to get used to this camera. It's on the opposite side of the desert biome's vegetation. So this guy would actually live in Sodal, and he's the apex. He's very bear-like. He's got these spines on his back and big claws and things like that. So yeah, he's the apex. You wouldn't want to meet him. He's the size of I'd say a Pizzly bear, which is a cross between a polar bear and a grizzly bear. So he's big. You wouldn't want to mess with him. Then we have the medium to large ones, which are a fox-like creature with several tails. He would be about the size of a direwolf, which doesn't exist anymore. And then you have this other creature with a big, like, shell-like mask on it. That's about the size of a very short-necked giraffe. I didn't draw it to scale with the fox-like creature. And the armor grows with age. The males have bigger horns than the females. This one that's drawn is a male. And then we have our smaller ones, which is this dinosaur-looking creature on one side, and this very strange-looking deer-like thing on the other. Now they're quite small, really. The deer-like one is about the size of a sika deer. And the dinosaur-like thing is, about the size of a large turkey. So you can see I'm going through this quite quickly because the video is quite long. And these are your obviously your biome relevant plants and fruits and vegetables. And you've got a lettuce like plant that grows these flowers and which have fruit on the ends when they're mature. and then you have these pear-like fruits that grow on the pine tree. Rather than pine cones, they grow fruit and have fungi like mushroom things growing out of the roots. And then you have the very strange cauliflower-like plant that grows on the surface of rocks. It doesn't grow in the dirt, it grows on the surface of rocks, and it's a purple like cauliflower. So yeah, that's all the pictures. For now, there are a couple of new pictures in here, but I have not made them spoiler free yet, so they won't be going up until I've done that, and I'm long overdue a shave. So yeah, that's all that I've got time for. The video's gone on for a while, and the camera appears to be glitching out because it's an old camera. So I'll leave that at that, and I will see you on the next video. This is probably going to be the last artwork showcase I do for a while. But if you want to see any new artwork I do, I'm uploading it to Twitter in photographs, or uploading it onto my DeviantArt, as you can see at the bottom of the video. So I'll see you next time.